Good evening and welcome to the OSI Postseason Hoops Special. I'm Adam Kruger. He's Ben Stevens. We're joined by John Niatawa from the Omaha World Herald. He covers Creighton athletics. And in the next half hour, we'll touch on the CU men and women, both NCAA tournament bound.
As are the NU women. We'll talk to Matt Coatney of the Husker Sports Network, and we'll bring in Nebraska men's basketball play-by-play voice Kent Pavelka, as the Huskers are now just a little over an hour away from their NIT first-round game at Mississippi State. But first, we begin with the Blue Jays.
That's right, John. The Jays headed to Charlotte to face Kansas State Friday. KU going in as an 8th seed. About what you expected for the Jays?
An 8 seed, I'm probably a little bit better than I expected, honestly. I think that there were maybe a few reasons why they could have been docked by the committee, didn't necessarily get a marquee win on the road. The non-conference strength of schedule wasn't rated as highly as maybe we thought going into the regular season, and maybe struggled a little bit down the stretch. But I think that the committee respected Creighton's big win over Villanova, the fact that it didn't have any bad losses and that it competed obviously pretty consistently throughout the year in a really tough conference. So maybe a little bit higher than I expected, but it's still going to be a tough road for Creighton to advance on this first weekend.
All right, looking at Creighton's opponent on Friday, the Kansas State Wildcats, Bruce Weber's team finishing 4th place in the Big 12 this season. K-State brings in an overall record of 22-11. They went 10-8 in league play. So, John, what stands out the most to you about the Wildcats, and what chance do you give them against CU?
I think it's going to be a toss-up game, honestly. It might play out, if Creighton fans remember, pretty similarly to the game against Providence in the Big East tournament. I think Kansas State is a team that would prefer to slow the pace of the game down, would prefer to play a little bit more physical style, maybe lean on its defense to set the tone of the game. And so Creighton's going to have to do its best to try to dictate or to put its stamp on the game and get the pace going and find a way to get some easy buckets and maybe build a lead. So, yeah, it's going to be a good matchup, I think, honestly. Contrasting styles, yes, but an opportunity for both teams who've been pretty consistent throughout the year to perform well on a big stage.
Of course, the biggest connection to K-State, Creighton star guard Marcus Foster, who transferred from the Wildcats following 2 years in Manhattan, Kansas. After the pairings were announced, Foster discussed facing his former team.
To play a team that you once played for. I think if you would ask me that question when I first got here, I would have been more like I want to get payback or have revenge. But, with this year being my senior year, it really didn't matter who we would have played. I would have been excited just to be able to get out there and play in this tournament. For me, I got to stay even keel. I can't get too excited about it or not try to overlook it. So just trying to go with it, just enjoy the experience for my last time.
So, John, do you think facing his former team will phase Foster at all, and how key will his play be in this tournament?
Marcus Foster has to be that dude. You think of any NCAA tournament team that finds a way to extend a run beyond the first weekend, a lot of times it's their lead guard, their go-to scorer, kind of putting the team on his back and carrying them. So he's going to have to do that. He didn't play his best in the NCAA tournament last year, and Creighton struggled because of that largely. So he's going to have to find a way to manage those emotions. He's saying the right things now. He is saying the right things, but I'm sure there's a part of him that's like buried deep down in that competitive soul where he wants to get back at his former club. How he, when he sits on the court or takes the court, how he settles in and manages those emotions, I think is going to be key for him.
So Foster leads the way for the Jays on offense. As for the defense, there's no question who's CU's man when it comes to that. Kyrie Thomas named the Big East Defensive Player of the Year for the 2nd year in a row. He had to share it with a couple other players last year, but this season Taz has it all to himself. John, how key will he be on defense in the big dance? And in your opinion, will this be the last tournament we see the former Benson Bunny play for Creighton?
It's hard to make that determination. Is it the last time he'll play for Creighton? Because he obviously has a really good opportunity, and the mock draft are saying he's a first-round pick. I think if that is legitimate, if those guys know what they're talking about, when he starts meeting with scouts and getting his opinion, I guess he can't necessarily interact with scouts firsthand, but he starts getting sort of more feedback from the NBA folks. If that's true, I think it is his last performance. So obviously he's going to want to play as well as possible, and he's got the skills to do it. Kansas State has 2 top scorers, Wade Davis, Dean Wade and Barry Brown. We'll see which one he's matched up against. That'll be one of the kind of subplots of the game, where Taz goes and who he guards.
And we know that Kyrie has kind of been a known commodity the last couple of years on defense, but has it surprised you how much he's jumped up in NBA draft projections?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because he was the guy who was getting overlooked even going into the year in his own conference. Like, he wasn't picked in the first or second team All Big East. So kind of was sliding under the radar. That was sort of his career narrative, and then suddenly for him to get the it's much deserved, by the way, but to get the admiration and the attention, it has been a little bit surprising. But you can see the potential every time he steps on the court, and he's been playing pretty well of late, kind of taking it to another level. So I mean, it's hard to imagine him putting on the Creighton uniform next year, but he hasn't. Like you said, he has not thought about it as much as he can. He's tried to focus on this season, so we'll see what happens when he actually does dig into it and start trying to make a decision.
Kyrie, a pretty humble dude, but you know he wanted to get rid of the co from last year and have that Defensive Player of the Year all to himself this season.
And he earned it, man. He earned it. He played really well.
And this season has brought some similarities to last year, most notably Creighton losing one of its key players during the conference season. Big man Martin Crumple tore his ACL back in January and had to miss the rest of the year. The sophomore was averaging nearly 12 points and 8 rebounds per game. John, how much has Creighton missed Crumple, and do you think they've figured out how to play without him yet?
Starting to figure it out. I don't know if they've necessarily made that full transition. I think it was a shock. You know, you don't think that maybe when you look at from afar, from maybe an overhead view of a team that loses. Hey, they didn't lose Kyrie Thomas, they didn't lose Marcus Foster. He wasn't one of their top key players, but the analytics said he was really impactful, one of the more impactful guys in the Big East, honestly. And you know, when you look at his physique and the ability to go jump and get those boards, put pressure on the rim on the other end, yeah, they've missed him and they've had to adjust for sure.
Now, Jacob Everson, one of those guys filling in for Crumple, burning that red shirt, but he's not the only freshman who's played significant minutes this season. Mitch Ballack and Tyshawn Alexander also working their way into the rotation this year. Ballack, in fact, named to the Big East All-Freshman team. So, John, among the freshmen, who's impressed you the most?
Man, I got to pick one. All three have been pretty good at times. I'd probably lean toward Jacob Everson, and he might be the biggest key for this team going into the NCAA tournament, because we're talking about Martin Crumple and his ability when he was in there. He was putting pressure on the rim, and he was grabbing rebounds and forming that presence at the rim to at least deter shots or make opponents think about a big man inside. So if Jacob, I think he's progressed, honestly. It seems like every time he steps on the floor, he's getting better, and they're going to need one of his best performances, not just against K-State, but if the Jays find a way to advance, he's going to have to be huge against Virginia. So he's my kind of X-factor guy, the guy that I'm looking at, and he's honestly, you pull a red shirt off a dude in the middle of January, and he's here doing what he's doing. That's really impressive what he's done.
Again, Creighton and K-State Friday at 5:50 on TNT. Later in the